Officer hats. Easy to make, always in demand. This is Kathy VanB's pattern. I'll show you how to put it all together. It's super easy. This is a fabric I use. It's got a slight grain to it, fantastic texture. It's a little thicker, it's a suiting, and I get my stuff at Joann Fabric. I'm chalking two of these out at once. It's easier to make two than to try and set your machine up a second time to make another one. And hats are always made slightly different. There's a little variations here and there. And it's nice to have a couple options to try and find which one fits the best. Two hats, 25 inches by 58. So on a 58-inch wide piece, this is 25 inches, that's two hats. So I don't know how well you can see that. It's a 1.5 yards roughly. There's no easy way to lay these out since they're such irregular shapes. So there's a little more interfacing than there is fabric, but you know, it is what it is. That's a 1.5 yards for 2 hats, not just one. Everybody's favorite part, ironing. Make sure the textured side is down. That's the wax side. Make sure you're using single-sided interfacing. Give it a couple seconds. I'm batching out both hats. I've got them cut. I might as well do it. That's it for ironing. On to sewing. I'm just going to sew these one right after the other. I'm doing visor to visor. Make sure you sew it right side to right side. Like I said, I'm just going to daisy chain all of these together. Next we're doing the front and back flaps. Now this is one interfaced piece to one non-interfaced piece. But again, it's still right side to right side. My edges don't perfectly match up here, but there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so it's alright. We have 3 more of these to do. Again, one is interfaced, one is not. I am periodically checking to make sure I'm still stitching and I haven't run out of bobbin. Now we're going to take the 2 sides and put them together. So the edges. It's just a simple, easy straight stitch. Make sure you don't do this. Put it right side to right side. Now we're going to stop for a second. Cut these 2 out. I'm going to flip this. Do the other side. Alright. Now we cut everything apart. Now we need to make a bunch of relief cuts. So anywhere that curves, you want to cut it kind of close. The closer you get to the line, or the closer you get it to your stitch, the smoother this is going to bend when we turn them inside out. Right side out. We turn them right side out. All we're doing, come along, making a bunch of cuts. Same thing with the side flaps. These you can space a little farther apart because the curve is a little more gentle. And be careful not to actually cut past your stitch. If you do that, it will fray a little bit on the outside. It'll be slightly noticeable. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but you can. Be careful. Also, try not to cut your fingers. The next step is to turn everything right side out and start pinning. Now we just do the same thing with the other things. Except I normally don't pin them. Pin if you feel more comfortable pinning. Don't pin if you don't. If you're relatively inexperienced, I would recommend pinning. So you can also press them. Turn them right side out, spritz them with a little bit of water, pressure and heat. Does fantastic things. I don't normally press these. I think I might on these just for something different. Once we put the top stitch on that, it'll hold it nice and flat. Same with the brims. Visors. Visor. I think it's a visor. Now for these, we're going to turn them right side out and then pin these flat, like here. I tend to pin them at the bottom and not the top because we're going to pin it to the top of the hat, and that'll take care of it for us. In case you're wondering, the wider part is the bottom, the narrower part is the top, just so there's no confusion. I'm going to bring you in so you can see how we pin this to the top, because it's probably the difficultest. It's probably the hardest part of making a hat, is getting everything to lay flat, because you're trying to get a relatively flat thing to go around a relatively round thing. First thing we're going to do is mark the middle on the top of the hat. We're going to mark it on the right side. I've got notches in my pattern piece, so I know exactly where it is. Just makes my life a little easier. We'll do it to this one too. Now that we have the middle mark, we're going to take this and pin this edge to this. So we want the middle to line up on this mark, right? And we flip it around. Sorry. Do the same thing to the other side. We mark the middle there. I have found it's easier to keep the brim flat and curl this around to it. So all we do, work our way around, keeping everything nice and flat and pinning. Again, this is the most annoying part of the entire hat. But once you get this done, everything else is pretty easy. So just move everything flat, put in a pin. Now there's going to be a lot of easement back and forth and back and forth. You might have to push things in a little bit, pull things out a little bit. You just want to make sure everything lays as flat as it can, because this is the top of the hat. It is the most noticeable part. So I'm just going to work my way the other way, make it nice and easy, nice and smooth. So we have a weird bunch here. Pull that out, redo it. If you sew that in place, you're going to have a weird pucker in there. Nobody likes a weird pucker in their hat. So, that's it. Top of the hat. The hardest part, it's almost done. Except I need to do it again with the other hat. So to show you again, I've got it marked. Start at the front of the hat, pin this on, and I pin this one on. Flip it over, go to the back of the hat. This is the most annoying part of the hat, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So I'm not fond of pinning things. Whenever possible, I'll free stitch, but this, every time, gets a pin. Because this, to do on a sewing machine by hand, oh my goodness, that would drive me nuts. So all I'm doing is pulling a small section nice and flat, pinning it in place. I try to leave a little gap at the back, work my way around. That way if I have to ease some in or out, I can pull those two pins. Sometimes the stitching between the two sides is maybe I'm a little closer than normal or a little farther than normal, and it just won't fit. And the only way to fix that is to move this either up or down some. Again, a 1/16 of an inch on a hat that gets a flap over it, nobody's gonna notice. It not laying right. Yeah, they'll notice that. Okay, see I've got a weird bunch here. I pull this out. Gonna raise everything up just a touch. Hopefully make that go away. There. Now just for clarification, front, back. Let's sew us a hat. So all I'm gonna do is lay this against the edge of my foot and sew, which should give me a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I am a firm believer in just sewing over needles. I know some of you are just screaming at the screen right now. Alright, let's show you that again at a different angle. So all I'm doing is pushing everything flat. Taking my time and going nice and slowly. This isn't a race. You lift your foot and make sure your needle's down. And I don't care what the hat's doing over here. I couldn't care less. I'm not stitching over there. I'm stitching right here. Right here is where I care. Just like with everything else, since this is going to need to curve, we want to come in and carefully cut around the edge. I give myself a little more space here than I normally do, because if there is a weird pucker, I'm going to have to pull the stitch, and I want there to be a little fabric there just in case. Work your way around, make sure you're cutting the part that you've sewn. You don't accidentally have some of something else in there. See, like right here? I'm pretty sure there's going to be a pucker right there. And I'll probably have to pull the seam there and fix it. Maybe not. We'll see. Same thing for this one. We want it to fold down towards the bottom of the hat. See, now here's what I'm talking about with the weird little pinches. But I think that'll work itself out. So I'm okay with that. Here's another one. Again, work itself out. Alright, now to do a top stitch. So what we want to do, we want to fold this down and put a top stitch. We want to fold this down and put a top stitch all along here. Relatively close to the seam line we just did. I want to make sure we pull it nice and taut, and then stitch all the way around. Alright, so what we want to do is pull this flat, and I'm just stitching as close to this. I want to be about 1 millimeter away, so it's pretty close. Alright, and all we do, pull it flat, work our way around. Now we're going to do that again, starting with the back. Lay everything as flat as you can. And then carefully, just stitch along the seam, about 1 millimeter away from this line. I really hope you all can see what I'm doing here. All right, so cut these threads and see where we're at. So if you look right here, this one had one of those little pinches I was talking about. It's the front of the hat, but there's going to be the brim goes right over it. I think I can live with that. This one, see this weird bulge you got right here? That's because I didn't pull it tight enough. So I'm going to pull the seam from here to here, re-stitch just this part. So now we're going to sew the flaps, the side flaps. I want this stitch to be 1/2 inch from the edge. So on my machine, all I have to do is run this foot right there. And since this one isn't pinned, I'm just gonna take my time, push everything flat. On to the next. Now for the bills, we do the exact same thing, except this is a little more complicated. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Now there is a huge rabbit hole you could just dive down about what is and is not canon with these bills. I go half inch, half inch, half inch, half inch until I run out of room. I would highly recommend you find out what officer you're trying to be. Look at their hat. See what you can find. If you can't find anything, go with what you think you should go with. So just like the outside, I'm just following this edge of my foot along the seam I just did. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to check my bobbin. So wind us a bobbin. So, once again, for the second time. There we go. Let's go put a hat together now. Hats are super easy to put together. This is the front, and this is the back. We start with one of these. We want to find the very center, and the top, and the bottom. The easiest way to do that is just fold it in half, mark it with a piece of chalk, mark it with a piece of chalk. We want to line this up so it lines up pretty decent. Line it up about with the top. Put a pin in. Then we line the bottom up, put a pin in. So now we want to work our way all the way around, putting pins in. And this is what gives your hat shape. That looks a little off. It's not. Alright then. We do the same thing with this one. We fold it in half. Glasses help you see. Fold it in half. And again, we want to line it up, that seam. So here's a common problem, and here's how to fix it. If you look, my seam is over here, but the center of my hat is here, here, and here. So somewhere along the way, I put this top brim on this one just a little off. It only takes a little bit. So instead of trying to line everything up with that seam, I'm going to line it up with the center of the hat. It's a seam that's completely covered. It's not that big of a deal, but it is slightly annoying. I do the same thing. Keep pinning and unpinning until you're happy with where it's at. That's an Imperial Officer Hat. That's doing something weird. Let's see if we can fix that. Now we put the brim on, and we do the exact same thing with the brim. Visor. Why do I keep calling it a brim? But this we line up with the center of this. See? And we want to carefully pull and pin this in place, line underneath. If you look, this one's got a little too much. This one's a little light, so I'm going to have to unpin and move everything over. About 1/8 of an inch. We want the overlap to be almost identical. It's a little off, it's a little off. And if we're here, we might as well do what we can, right? There we go, that's much better. So now we're going to sew 1/2 inch along the seam here. You've seen me sew, so I'm not going to bring you in close for this one. And it really is just sewing. That was not a happy noise. There's no pins there. I don't know what that was all about. Nope. Alright, we're going to stop for a second and reset and figure out what the hell just happened to my sewing machine. Let's seam this hat now. 1/2 inch from this one right here, along the 1/2 inch from the edge. Really? Gonna be another one of them days? Gonna be another one of them days. Hit a pin. Let's see what you're doing then. A lot of fabric right here. It is not happy about it. It's about to be really unhappy with me. So if we weren't lining this, we'd basically be done. So it gets folded down. So we pull the whole thing out flat like this, right? I'm not overtly happy with this hat, but it is what it is. So at this point, we put a stitch right along here. It's not that big of a deal where the stitch is, because it's going to be pretty much covered with the flaps anyway. So just one stitch all the way across. So we want to make sure is that this is folded up, and that is what we are stitching through. My sewing machine does not like this fabric. Jeez Louise. And there it is. Non-lined hat, done. Pull the flaps up. Pull the flaps up. Unlined Imperial Officer Hat. Everything nice and taut. I got a bunch of loose strings I need to cut. But other than that, this one is done. So, let me show you how to line it now. To line a hat, we need a top and two sides. So, get a top and two sides. Some nice shiny yellow lining. I don't use yellow very often. This is super slick fabric. My machine does not like smooth and shiny fabrics. I don't know why. So now, we basically just make this again. We're going to sew these two edges together, make sure the shiny side is facing each other, and then we're going to pin and sew this to this. This and this with this and this. We are going to pin the sides to the top. I'm not going to bother changing my thread. I'm also really not going to bother bringing you in super close. I went through that once already. Now this is the point where if you were inclined, you would stitch a name or an ID number or something in there. I am not. Apparently I am going to fight with this stupid thing. Shiny fabrics look nice, but they are the worst to use. Luckily, you can be a lot less careful on the inside. There's weird bunches on the inside that don't make a difference. Now at this point you can do a top stitch if you want. I usually don't. There's not a need. It's a hat lining. Hat lining. We're at the same point with this one that we were at the other one. We have to line everything up, put it all together, pin everything. Now I like to make sure that the interface side is on the outside of the hat. It's just, I think it's a little nicer. It looks a little better. Looks a little more imperial. And start with the front again. This is the front. We line this up, pin it on. And then we do the same thing with the back. This is a lot of fabric to go through, which I suppose is a testament to the Brother Sewing Machine. Seems to have a gap here. I don't like that. So let's pull these out. See if we can pull that down just a little bit. Every hat is different. That's better. Still don't like this side. Since I was so unhappy with that hat, I'm probably taking a little more time with this one than I normally would. Try and do a silver lining kind of thing. That looks good. Overlap is the same. Alright. Yeah, we're going to stop. So this, trim away all the excess and then pin the brim on. I don't want to pin it on right now because we've got about a 1/2 inch here. And if I pin it on there, it's a 1/2 inch we're losing on an already small brim. So I'm just going to go across. It's the thickest part of the hat. I don't even have the brim on yet. Visor. I don't even have the visor on yet. I can tell already I'm going to like this one a lot better. Now we attach the brim. Visor. Jeez Louise. Now to attach the lining. This is the back. Line the back up with the back. Oh, for the goodness. Then you want to pin that lined up with that. You want the seam lined up with this seam. So now I'm going to leave a gap about that big, a few inches, so I can turn the hat right side out once this is all said and done. This is where we get to manhandle these stupid things. I'm sure there's a right way to do linings, and this probably isn't it, but this is the way that I know how. This is the way I'm going to do it. And I am absolutely sure I'm going to get an earful from Kathy when she sees this one. What did you do to my pattern? I tend to put double needles where I start and stop the stitch just to remind me to stop, because I have more times than I care to count just gone all the way around and gone, oh, and I had to pull a seam. It happens. Broke a needle. You knew it was going to happen. So don't break many needles. Or I break a lot of needles and just don't realize it. One way or the other. Let's switch this one out. Figure if I have to do this, I'll bring you along for the ride. Let me ramble at a camera for a bit. Goodness. Oh, and then I put the camera on, the needle doesn't want to thread. So this thing comes with this automatic needle, or automatic threader, right? Never works. We're gonna try it anyway. Yeah, I figured. First time I said it never works. Alright, back to where we were. Game on. Needle sounds much, much sharper. Regularly change your needles. It makes your experience much easier. I always forget that until I break a needle. Then I'm like, oh yeah, I should have changed that thing ages ago. I don't often lock my stitches in place. I do when I do a lining, just because I know I'm going to be pulling on it a lot, and I don't want it to rip itself out. Slide this through here. Come on. Nice and easy. Oh, for the goodness. Pull all the flaps down. Now, we're going to fold. Okay. We're going to stitch. If you look right here, you can see where the fabric ends. We want to stitch right above that. I'm going to fold this over. The opening here normally gets heat seamed in place. And I'll probably do that when I press it. But I'm going to pin it now so I can see where it is. Pay attention. I might not heat seam it. I might just stitch it closed, since I'm going to stitch over it anyway, right? So, put a stitch all the way along. Let's start in the back. Why not? The closer I am to the end of the project, the more likely I am to not pay attention to my thread and have it pull out on me. You would think, after 30 years of sewing, I'd be like, hey, watch your thread. Nope. Also, if I'm being completely honest with myself, it's closer to 40 than it is to 30, but you know, let me pretend I'm 20 still. I absolutely hate stitching this with lining up, because the whole time I'm sitting here going, I'm doing this wrong. This isn't right. This can't be right. This doesn't make any sense. Alright, it might not be my prettiest hat. That's all I got to that sentence. So we'll turn it right side out. Turn this down. Turn the bill down. And everything else up. So, good steam in a press, nice greeble. And there is a fully acceptable hat. So it took a couple hours. Wasn't too terrible. We got two very nice hats out of the process. Hats are super easy to make. They don't take up a lot of fabric. It's a great way to get rid of some of your lining. And they're always in demand. No matter what garrison you're in, somebody needs a hat. They're easy to make, you might as well.